welcome to the Knowledge Find Tutorials. Today we are going to learn the new topic under the career guidance. The topic is backend developer roadmaps. If you want to continue the career or start the career under the backend development, you need to follow the instructions or the roadmap that you need to learn. So let me start the topic. Before we move to the topic, you need to get the idea regarding the backend development and the front-end development. So the front-end development, which means the related to the creating the web application user interface. You can only observe the web elements, the color layouts, and the user interface, and feels the user experience through the front ends. So under the backend development, you need to consider the functional related things, which means you need to validate the things that you need to get the ideas from the actual database, and you need to get the correct outputs related to the inserted variables. So backend is full of functions and full of logics. So then now let me see what are the basic things if you need to study when you choose the backend development. So before you need to start the learning under the backend development, you need to get the basic idea of front-end development. So you need to study the following language, which means to create the web applications. So those languages are HTML, which means Hypertext Markup Language. It is a basic skeleton of creating web page. And another language is CSS. It is Cascade Style Sheet. If you want to style your web application by coloring your web applications or giving some colors or giving some font colors or the font size change or font formats, if you want to change that, you need to learn the CSS. And another thing under the JavaScript, if you want more animations and if you want the validations and small functions related to the inline validations, you need to prefer the JavaScript. So those three are the major and basic front-end development languages. So then let me see the backend programming languages. There are a lot of backend programming languages are available now, but let me see some of them one by one. One is JavaScript. Another one is Python, PHP, Ruby, Rust, Java, Golang. Those are the languages you need to study to get the job in the backend development. And under those languages, several frameworks are available. Frameworks, which means, let us explain there the small example. If you are using any of the web template from the website, you will get easily and get edit the web application which you want to create. So as like that, frameworks are also like a template. You can manipulate and you can implement the existing code that they had written, and you can add your lines, which means add your functions under those frameworks, and you can easily implement that. So that is the framework. It is such as those are the similarity between the template and the framework. And those programming languages such as JavaScript, Python, PHP, each programming language has each or more frameworks. Let me say JavaScript. JavaScript has several frameworks. their Node.js and Deno. So nowadays the Node is most popular. In nowadays you can notice several web applications or mobile applications also developed through this Node.js. And under the Node.js also it has several frameworks. Express.js, Nest.js, Fastify, Sails, Happy, Restify, Koha. Those are built upon the Node.js frameworks. And if you are studying the Python, you need to study another frameworks under the Python, Django and Flux. Django and Flux both are built up with a Python framework. And if you are studying the PHP language, you need to study one of the framework from the PHP. The PHP frameworks are Laravel, Symfony. And if you are studying the Ruby, you need to study Rails framework and Centera framework. If you are studying Java, you need to study the Spring Google Web Toolkit. And under the Rust language, you need to study Rocket RS. Under the Go language, you need to study J. And let me consider the C#, you need to study the ASP.NET. That is the most famous framework. So those are the frameworks. First, you need to choose your language, which means the programming language which you want to study. Then you need to select the particular framework from your programming language. So that is the thing you need to consider. Rather than the programming language, you need to study several concepts. You need to study the protocols, which means the HTTP and HTTPS, because if you want to navigate to the web application, you can only the way to navigate to the web application is through the protocol, which means Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So you need to study about HTTP and HTTPS. And another part, another concept is API, Application Interface. So API, which means here you are accessing, which means you are the user, you are accessing the application from the server. So you need to request the server, then the server will validate the things from your request, then it will send the response to the client computer. So there are two applications are communicating, that is the API concept. So you need to study those categories of APIs. The REST API is one of the category of API. And you need to study about the SQL concepts, GraphSQL, or if you can study about the MongoDB, and WebSockets, CORS, MVC architecture, CI/CD, which means the GitHub version controlling, server-side coding, serverless coding. So those are the extra concepts you should learn. And apart from the programming language, all data should be stored under the database. Then only we can check through the functions whether the data is retrieving from the particular space. So you need to store the data under the databases. So there are two types of databases. It is classified into two types mainly. Those are SQL and non-SQL. SQL, which means structured query language, which means those data are allocated in the tables. Then you will get the records by one rows. So under the SQL database category, you can use the MySQL, PostSQL, SQLite. Under the NoSQL database category, you can use MongoDB, CouchDB, and DynamoDB. Under the NoSQL, which means it is not a structured language, the data has been prepared and stored under the objects, and you will get each object through the documents. So nowadays, most of the coders are using the MongoDB because it is the real-time database. And apart from those, you need to learn about Redis, Memcached, ORM, ODM related things, Mongoose, Prisma, and Quizlets. And other essential things to learn, those are authentication applications, which means authentication, auth, hashing, rate limiting, reverse proxy, load balancer, and documentation, which means Swagger, which is used to do the API related things. And before you are building the front end, you need to check whether the data is communicating with the server in the good response model. So you need to confirm this through the API. So you can use Swagger or any of the API tool. You can use the Postman also. And here you need to study the authentication OAuth, because if you are logging to several credentials, if you are using if you are building the login form, you need to follow the credential and you need to provide the credential to log in the application. Those credentials are username and passwords. So when the user log via the particular username and password, the user should not allow to log again through any of the device with the same username and password, because there is a session expired feature is allowed through this authentication. So that is the special feature. So you can implement those features under your backend development. And apart from that, if you need to study about the HTML templating engine, e.g. Aspage, handlebars.jat, etc. And you can use Windows application, which means Windows operating system, but you need to learn about the Linux as well, and you need to learn the CLI command line interface commands, and you need to learn about the JIT commands. JIT is a remote repository. You need to push your codes under the remote repository, then only you can collaborate with your teammates and easily manipulate your codes. So another thing is you need to follow the basic networking things and the web security, and you need to practice the payment gateways logics, and you need to learn about the testing, which means the API testing and the unit testing as well. And you need to learn and practice about the server-side deployment. You can use the cloud service, Google Cloud, DigitalOcean, AWS. Those are nowadays most of them are using, and Azure also nowadays we are using, and Heroku, Lenovo, those are the cloud-based applications. And you need to learn the scalability of the system. So you need to learn about how to measure the web application performance. So you need to learn and study about the Docker performance, scalability, and Kubernetes. And apart from that, you need to learn the NPM, which help to create the Node.js application, Yarn, Postman tool, which means for the API testing, and Isomania. And if you want to push your codes on the Git repository, you need to have the GitHub account, and you need to learn about how to commit the code, how to clone the code from the GitHub account, and how to pull the code, and how to merge the code, how to create branch when you're working with the collaborators. So you need to learn the following things. And only studying those technical things is not enough to build your career in backend development. You need to practice those things by doing some projects. So you need to practice the projects in several types. Those are, you need to follow the social media, web application, chat app, video chat app, REST API, web scraper, URL shortener. You need to practice block application. You need to practice the Travelog application, which is a real-time application, and file sharing, user system, weather logger, e-commerce API. You need to practice the several types of projects. Then only you will get the errors, and from the errors you can study the several things rather than referring the resources. So you need to write out the technologies you need to study. Then you can refer so much of things from the internet. Then you need to follow some projects and do the projects. Then only you will get the idea to become the backend developer. So that is the roadmap you need to consider to become a backend developer. So let me meet in another video. Thank you. Bye.